InfoSec, so if you wanted to go to the other one that's downstairs, sorry. Give you a minute to walk out the door if that's really what you want to do. It's fine, I won't be offended. My name's Alexis Womble. I'm going to kind of walk you through my journey and how I got into InfoSec. I'll go over my agenda in just a minute, but a little bit about me. I am... let's see, I'm 2 days premature. Okay, in 2 days, I'll be starting as a senior threat analyst at BAE Systems. I went to Missouri Baptist University here in St. Louis, so that's what brought me to the area. That's also my Twitter, so you might know me from there. I've met a few people from here. It's been really great. Woo! So, a little background about me, how I got into IT, specifically InfoSec, and how I got interested in this area. I actually started back in high school. I did not do any computer classes. I just saw this one movie and I was like, oh, that looks cool. It wasn't one of those hacker movies. I haven't seen really any of those. I don't watch a whole lot of movies. But there was this girl who's doing intelligence work for the military. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. She knows all this stuff. She gets to tell them what to do. That sounds like my kind of position. And my dad was like, oh, so you want to be an intelligence officer? And I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. Like, that's what I want to do. So that led me to obviously coming here to Missouri Baptist University and pursuing an IT degree. So while I was doing that, between my gen ed classes, I did what every other college student does. I binge watched Netflix, of course, because I was very bored with my life, obviously. And that's where I found Arrow and this character up here, Felicity Smoke. Has anyone here seen Arrow? Hopefully 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, a few of us. So if you don't know her, she is like a badass hacker, right? So she's like wizard level. She's like your typical movie hacker. She goes in, she like hacks in like 5 seconds and she's done, right? She's popped all the boxes. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah, I want to do that. So I took a few programming classes and I took a few cybersecurity classes as they were available. And when I came out with my degree, I definitely was not Felicity Smoke level. I didn't know what I was doing still. I was like, C++, hate that. That's the programming language I start with. That's a whole nother story. I could give a talk about how terrible it is. But I thought that, hey, this could still be fun. IT is something that has a lot of different areas. So I applied to my old job now, Express Scripts. Not 1 year, but 2 years in a row to about 12 to 15 different IT jobs. Anything that had IT in it, information technology. I just kind of sprayed my resume out there. I was like, get me in. Let me do something. Please pick me. Obviously, the first year I didn't get in because I had to apply for a second year. And that's kind of where it brings us to now. So if you haven't been able to tell by now, this is not a technical talk. I'm not going to be dropping 0 days. I'm not going to be talking about tools. But I'm writing this if you're interested in hearing a journey from someone early in their career, if you're kind of getting into information security, or if you want to hear a journey, someone be more empathetic to this kind of thing. Always, I have to point out, the views expressed in this presentation are not necessarily reflective of my current or past employer. This is just the journey in my story as how I found it. So I will be going over a few different things here. How I opened the door to InfoSec, how I slammed my door and my foot in the door, and then how I opened the door again. And then some lessons learned and some takeaways. So jumping right in, as I told you from my first slide, I pretty much took my resume and just sprayed it out there. I was like, I'm going to apply to over 12 internships, get rejected probably by all of them, right? That's not actually what happened. I got a call back from a development role, and I told them, hey, I hate coding, but I'll take the job. I took it as a learning opportunity. I decided that coding is something that happens for hackers. They definitely have to do that. So why not learn? So how many of you have heard of the IT crowd? all my references come from like this very select few of movies and TVs I've seen. So if you've seen the IT crowd, which seems like a lot of us have, I was Jen. I felt like I got this job because I could open emails, respond to emails, delete emails, that kind of thing. I wasn't very technically sound. Like I said, I took a C++ class and a C# class. Both hated. Barely passed. But I was stronger with my soft skills. So I was very confident. I went in. I actually made a full stack website, did the front end, back end, did all that fancy stuff, made it look really pretty. It's something that they still use today, so it's really cool. And then something that was really great is during this internship, I was assigned a mentor, so a peer mentor. So she actually helped me. She was like, every week she would check in and be like, hey, so do you like coding yet? And I was like, no. Like for 12 weeks straight, she'd be like, so do you like it yet? And I'd be like, no. Do you like it yet? No. But what was really great is I told her like, oh, hey, I want to do this thing, cybersecurity, information security, whatever everyone calls it, what the kids are calling it these days. So she helped me meet with all of the senior managers, directors, senior directors, and our CISO at the company that I was working with at the time. Got to sit down with them for 30 minutes, have a one-on-one, kind of talk to them, tell them about my passions, tell them what I was interested in. And this really helped networking my way into like figuring out what I could possibly be interested in. So I like to say that I talked my way into my next position. So I went on from my dev position in the summer to a red team position. And I was like, oh, finally, I get to be a hacker, right? It was a big leap, though. Obviously, I had only, like I previously said, taken 1 or 2 cybersecurity classes. I had stood up this website that everyone was impressed with, but I didn't even know how it worked. I had a lot of help. I was kind of swimming in the deep end, for sure. So, and I definitely was like this grandma at the top. I was like, oh my gosh, I found default passwords in these websites, you guys. It's so cool. When everyone else was like popping real boxes, I was sitting in the corner, like cheering on. I talk about this because I was challenging myself. I was very far behind in all my basics because I didn't know what I was doing. It was like someone turned a fire hose of knowledge on for me, and I was like slowly but surely drowning. So even though I found a few default passwords, I wasn't doing anything remotely exciting, right? This led to actually a lot of self-deprecation. So I was on this team for about 5 months, and during this time, a lot of tears were spilled. Sorry, I'm actually sick, so there'll be a lot of drinking. But I was on a very technically sound team who really knew what they were doing and didn't know how to coach me up. So I was kind of the intern who was like, hey, you told me how do we get from like putting google.com in, then what happens? Like having to learn like the very low level stuff, to a team who's like Mimikatz and all those big things, Kerber roasting, golden ticket passing, you know, those big ticket items. So I was definitely in over my head. And this is kind of where I first learned about the bell curve of knowledge. And if you don't know what this is, I like to kind of explain it like this. So you have like a bell curve, and at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. So that was my dev opportunity. I didn't know anything. I thought, hey, this sounded really cool, right? And then when I was on the red team, I kind of peaked. And by peaked, I mean I learned all the areas I didn't know about. So I didn't know about Mimikatz. I didn't know about AD. I didn't know about the network. And that really scared me, and it really beat down on me. Obviously, the end is you know what you know, but I obviously wasn't there yet. So I didn't know what to ask for. Didn't know how to ask for what I needed, didn't know how to like coach myself. I was in a really hard time, kind of started beating down on myself, because I felt really stupid. So I felt like I slammed my foot in the door. I was like, great, I got this great opportunity to become a Felicity Smoke. I have this opportunity to get an InfoSec, and I'm blowing it. I'm going to be fired, who knows what. And then December of last year, I got the opportunity to move on to a blue team. And this is kind of where I start opening the door again. So when they told me that I would be moving on to a blue team, I was like, oh, why? I was very anxious. I was like, I've heard all the back and forth between blue and red. I wasn't very excited to do something less technical. I was kind of like the girl at the top. I was like, thanks, but no thanks. I think I'm finally maybe getting the hang of red team. You should just hold on to me a little longer. So I was equally hopeful and equally nervous. But I did learn a lot through this. So I realized that I was a very task-oriented person, not something I had on the previous team. And this was something I had gotten from my new team. They had a lot of documentation already put in place, and my manager was really good at letting me develop those. Something else I wanted to mention is that I had an advocate working for me while I was on the red team. He had my best interest in mind for me and would talk to my old director on my behalf a lot. So anytime I would come back to my cubicle and just kind of like sniffle in the corner, he would come up to me and be like, what's wrong? And I'd be like, it's nothing. He'd be like, no, it's wrong. And I was like, I feel really stupid. Like, I can't firewalk our main.com. Like, there's something wrong with me. And he was like, Alexis, no one can do that. That's impossible. We would be breached. So he really gave me those sanity checks. And I was really grateful that he became my new manager on this team. Actually, someone I got to know from networking over the summer. So he sat me down at the beginning of this rotation, and he got real with me. He noticed that my confidence was not at a level it had been over the summer. He noticed those self-deprecating tendencies that I had had, and he pointed it all out to me, which, of course, at first I was like, excuse you? What do you mean? How rude of you? But then I had to give myself a self-check and just be like, okay, no, he like obviously means this for the best. And I was being terrible and hard on myself. So he did a really good job of easing me into this role, instead of fire hosing me with information and being overwhelmed. Another amazing thing he did was told me that I should start talking with women in technology. This is not something I thought was valuable before. I was like, it doesn't matter. We're all in technology together. But he made me realize that they might have similar stories, and he couldn't support me in ways that they could. So, through this, I found I actually had more mentors and more sponsors that I knew besides him who were working on my behalf behind the scenes. It was a really great feeling coming from such a deprecating and low point of my life to sitting down with one woman who viewed me as a beacon of hope for women in technology. And she said that she believed that I could have a seat at the table one day. Like, I literally just cried. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to be fired, and you're here thinking I could be a CISO, which is what I want to do. Another woman I met with suggested I get more involved with our employee resource groups. So I joined 2 women in technology, women over the whole corporation's subcommittees, one for Lean in Circles, one for Celebrating Women, which was really empowering. Another one that I got involved with was Women of St. Louis. So those are women of different corporations come together, and we do a lot of learning, about once a quarter, roughly. Not only was that great to network, with women, but also women outside of my company, women outside of my position. Something I had not mentioned up until now is I was the first and only female in each of these positions. So I didn't really have that representation to look at. So slowly but surely, this helped me gain my confidence back. Obviously, nothing is sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. Halfway through this rotation, my biggest sponsor and mentor, my manager, left because we were going through a merger at the time and decided to leave the company. Luckily, though, I have most of my team was remote at the time, I did have a very good group of guys who supported me. Honestly, the sweetest group of guys. They always would tell me hey, you're doing a really good job, or hey, this looks really nice, just improve this, instead of beating down on me. So eventually, I learned with a lot of guidance from my coworkers how to perform my job like them and work as like I was a regular employee, because I was still an intern during the time. This is back in like April, I think. And I actually had forgot the main reason that I got into technology was to become an Intel analyst until I was writing this presentation. So I actually ended up in my real dream job, not the hacker fantasy that I thought I wanted. So, as I mentioned, our company was going through a merger, and I was told that I might not have a position. So, not only were the networking great for just like knowing other women and having shared stories, but I also was able to like look outside the company. I did end up staying as a full-time employee for a few months, but it was something that was really nice to have in the back of my pocket, in my LinkedIn circles, to fall back on. But why? So this is my story, but why does it matter? Why do I get up here and talk about my failures, right? I've obviously highlighted some of my lowest lows and none of really my highs. Like I said, with my dev team, I set up this website that I'm still very proud of to the day. And on the red team, I did do some campaigns. I did do some retests. It wasn't all failures. On the blue team, obviously it was pretty amazing, learning about threat intelligence and malware, a lot of. But I did take a lot of learning from my failures, so that's why I kind of highlight them today. So here's what I learned. The first thing I learned is networking, and this is what you do to get your foot in the door or after you get your foot in the door, right? I want to highlight this specifically from my first story because I would have not gotten to information security by sitting at my desk and coding all day. I also just wouldn't have fallen back and had the mentors and sponsors that I would have had, who advocated on my behalf without me even knowing, without doing this from day one. I like to joke with a lot of people that I talked my way into information security, which I totally believe. I really didn't have any credentials up until actually getting in, right? I only had dev work, and before that I worked in like restaurant industries. So my resume wasn't very impressive, but my passions, my skills, that I could manage, those are what really set me apart. The fact that I would go in there and be like, I want to learn. So this is really important. You have to sell yourself. I took this lesson with every team that I went to, and this is why I've ended up where I am. My old manager from my blue team was my advocate because of the networking. So it's never a bad time or a bad idea to reach out to people, connect on LinkedIn, and meet others around your company or even outside. When I was interviewing for other companies, I used my networks to find other jobs, to match what I've done, match what I want to do, and then also get an inside scoop on companies that I possibly was interested in. So one question I've gotten on this specifically is how? How do I take this leap into networking? I do have a procedure that I like to follow. I think it's really easy and it's very effective. I've given this advice to a lot of people, actually. Most recently, an intern that I got to mentor this last summer. So it's a couple like steps. So the first step is you want to obviously scoop out people who impress you. We're in InfoSec. OSINT isn't that hard. We all can look around and notice people, right? So I would say pick like 3 to 5 people around your office or outside your office that you know are in the areas that you're interested in. And then after you find out who you think you could talk to, I suggest then going to them and introducing yourself and your background. So, hi, I'm Alexis. I work in dev, then I worked in red, then I worked in blue. This is what I'm working on now. I'm really interested in XYZ. Very short, keep it very brief. Next thing you want to do is compliment them. Hey, so-and-so told me that you're really good at this. I'm interested in learning more about that. Hey, I noticed this about you. Hey, this, and this. People respond really, really well to compliments. And then after that, ask them how they got to that position. So yeah, I saw you're really good at this. How'd you get there? What's your background? What's your area of business really focus on? Once you start asking people about themselves, trust me, they'll open up and talk. I've noticed people like talking about themselves, which is kind of why I'm up here, right? And then after all that should just take a few minutes. Sometimes you can fill up a 30-minute slot if you want to. But the last and most important thing is you ask, okay, so now who do you think I should go talk to? Who knows more than you do? Or who knows more about this area? That helps by getting about another 3 to 5 people. So therefore, you're just like exponentially growing your network. The important thing is even if you're uncomfortable, you need to reach out to people. Reaching out, being, like I said, the first and only female in each of my teams was really important to connect with people on a different level. I hate golfing. I don't play video games. I'm very boring. I sit at home. I have a cat. So I didn't really bond with the guys on my team as much as other guys did, right? Or other guys coming in. So I had to figure out and notice little things that I could connect with them on. It was even harder because I don't have kids. I'm not married. Like, you really have to like notice people and weave a narrative about, how you can connect. Another big thing is inviting them to coffee or lunch. That's another big thing, that I would suggest. Because like if you're shy, if you're a woman, if you're the minority, your interests aren't always going to line up with the people around you. But the good thing is you have in common work if you work with them. And also, if you don't have a mentor assigned to you like I did, this is a great one to find one, seek one out. A lot of people sometimes don't have the time, but are willing to point you in the right direction. So really, you should be expanding your network, look for org charts, LinkedIn. These are all really good materials to do that. The next thing I want to talk about is changing the workplace. Another survey. Who here has seen Pearl by Pixar? One person. That's typically how it goes. So this isn't actually too old, but I can give you a little blurb about what Pearl is. So this was taken from Short of the Week blog. So set in high-powered world of Bro Capital, BRO, Pearl follows its central character as she goes to work in a male-dominated office and finds herself struggling to fit in. A story centered around themes of belonging and understanding, Pearl is left with a tough decision. Change her ways to fit in or carry on being herself and face a life of loneliness and isolation at work. So, kind of hits home for some of us. Like I just said, you're not always going to fit in with everyone that you work with. And if you can see here, obviously she changed herself. Sorry to spoil it. But, so this little ball of yarn comes in, right? She's pink. Everyone's wearing suits and she notices she doesn't get invited out to dinner. She doesn't get invited out to the bar after work to happy hour. And she was like, what the heck? Like, I'm doing my work just the same. No one's listening to me. No one's listening to my ideas. So she knits herself a suit, obviously. And once she changes, people start listening to her. People start inviting her places. And spoiler alert, at the end, a yellow ball of yarn walks in, same as her, all excited, ready to go. And she realizes, oh shoot, I've changed myself. And I don't want her to have to change herself as well. We should be more inclusive. So I mention this because of my burnout kind of in the second one. I had been at such a low point in my very short career, I should say. But because I changed myself, I became this girl who was the dumb intern. I had to change myself to be the one to fit in just so I could belong in this space. Changing in the workplace, obviously. If you haven't seen this, it's going to hit home more than my words. But it's also just a really important part to remember for actually another later slide. So another thing I learned, if you haven't learned it already, is I didn't realize how difficult it could be being the only woman on every team I had been on. It wasn't until my last role until I realized that having women in my corner is something that can be both empowering and inspirational. Even just sitting down with women, someone listening to their story, how they got to where they are, hear what they love and what, it can all just be really good information when you're new to the workforce. Not only women, there's also great men out there with good stories as well, but, I've heard a lot of same kind of horrific stories from women, and so when they can validate your own horrific stories, it's very empowering. And this often gives you a support system you didn't know you needed. So this shows the CISO demographics of the top Fortune 100 list. Now, this might not be important for some people, but for some of us that want to be CISOs in the next, 10 years, this is kind of scary just because 89% of CISOs are men, which means I have yet to see a CISO, and I've gone through 3 now, who's female, who I can look up to. The highest position that I've seen a female at in my department would be director. And we had about 1 million of those, so that wasn't very shocking. So representation can matter. I don't want to get on a soapbox and talk about this all day because that could be a different talk. But this is just something that I like to highlight because it's hard when you don't see people at the top or people next to you. So this kind of all ties back into learning about your brand and learning about yourself. So I learned obviously from my second story that I learned about my communication styles, how I like to learn, different things about myself. I learned what worked, what didn't work about me, what kind of structure I needed, and how to deal with people who communicated differently than I did. Along with these things, I was forced to brand, rebrand, and then rebrand myself. I think we talk about branding in InfoSec a lot. We beat that dead horse a ton. I think I've heard about 1 million stories on branding, so I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I had my personal brand going on to my first team as a very confident, bold intern who's not afraid to let people know that she wanted to be CISO. I was very outspoken, very loud. I didn't care what people thought. I knew I was going to do great work, and I was there to do it. And then on my second team, like I mentioned before, I felt like I had to rebrand myself to the guys and be this cool but very dumb girl, right? I was surrounded by InfoSec, what we call rock stars. Very smart people, honestly, but I didn't know how to personally relate to them. So the best way I knew how to do that was to make myself the dumb cool girl who we could all make fun of. So everyone loved making fun of me, which was fine, right? I let it happen. And then on my last team, I had to rebrand myself, and I had to have that wake-up call with my manager, who pointed out that I had lost my confidence and that I didn't want to be the weak, dumb girl on the team anymore. So I point this out just because you think you might know your brand, but it's easy to lose that in InfoSec, I think, because of the vision that you want. So, going in, I was like, I want to be this hacker. So if I'm going to be on the hacking team, I have to be the dumb girl, right? And that's not who I am. So definitely learn a lot about that. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is that your journey is not going to be straight nor smooth. So I think that's quite obvious about my journey today. It's kind of all over the place. But it got me to where I am today. I've heard this from a lot of people, and nothing happens how you expect it to be, but that's totally okay. 2 things that I want to tie together with this journey is imposter syndrome and tiara syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is talked about a lot in the InfoSec community. It's when, you don't realize how far you've come, and that's definitely where I was in that second story. But also tiara syndrome. I thought if I kept my head down all day, did my work, that someone would come and place a tiara on my head, and that's not how it always happens. And that kind of goes back to the networking piece, that you really have to go out there and sell yourself. So this, obviously encapsulates my journey. This is my own, and everyone's is going to be different here. So I encourage everyone to talk about their journeys, reach out to me. That's totally fine. Reach out to each other, really get talking, because we're not going to understand what each other is going through until we talk about it. And it's not always easy to talk about. And one thing with this is I've definitely talked a lot about women in technology sharing their stories, but it's important for men to talk about their experiences as well, because we don't see them talking a whole lot to each other nowadays. So hopefully by listening to my struggles, you can see that it's possible to get through it. And that even if you're not struggling, that maybe the person sitting next to you is. So follow me on Twitter to see my crazy life. But other than that, thank you so much.